Welcome back to another Awareness to Action Enneagram podcast. My name is Creek, and I'm with my drowsy, oh wait, no, that's me, co-host, Sikora and María, José, Munita. We're doing an unusual Monday morning recording, and I'm not a fan. I'm just going to put that out there.
Would not be my preference either, but
here we are. Yeah. And we're going to be taking on a very light topic today, thank goodness. With no coffee in the system, we're going to be talking about spirituality.
There you go.
So,
really, it's 9:00 and you haven't had coffee
no, yet? See, I woke up at 8:30 and I just didn't have time. And, you know.
Did you really wake up?
Well, kind of. But real quick, María José, you were part of a tennis tournament this past weekend. How did it go?
It went great, depending on the angle you look at. So I was part of the organization of the tournament, and it went really, really great. I also played, and that didn't go that well. I mean, I enjoyed, but it's out of my league. It's a really competitive, high-level tournament, and I'm just like a regular player. I enjoy it, but I'm not that good. So I enjoyed it. I learned, and all the people were very happy with the results of the tournament.
Very nice.
They enjoyed it.
Very nice.
So I'm happy.
I think it's great that you jumped into a tournament that's above your league. That takes guts.
That's what I told her the other day too. I'm like, I would never do that. That's insanely mature.
And I enjoyed it.
That's amazing. Mario, what'd you do this weekend?
I played in a tennis tournament too.
That's not surprising at all.
No, tennis is something I never took to. I tried it once or twice, and it was just too difficult for me. And I said, "Screw that."
Did you play sports?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I
mean, I played, organized baseball as a kid. Played all sorts of things, intramural, and I did martial arts for almost 20 years. So, it's not
Is
really
martial art
a
a sport? I mean,
well, I did do kickboxing for a bit, which. But not for that long, because I quickly realized that getting punched in the face is only fun for so long, So,
but punching people in the face, now that
well, it's certainly better than the alternative.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just procrastinating getting into this.
Come on, let's get to it.
So, oftentimes in the Enneagram community, there's obviously a lot of different spiritual backgrounds, religious traditions that are brought by the person to an Enneagram community. A lot of teachers use the Enneagram alongside of spiritual traditions. And oftentimes we get questions about why don't you all talk about spirituality or just what do you think about spirituality, those sort of things. So we thought we'd address that in this episode, and then we'll be having some follow-up episodes with some people that are deep into their religious tradition that we think are thinking deeply about things in a way that is honest and really reflective. So let's start off with...
So can I make a suggestion of a starting point here?
Yeah, sure.
So just by way of background, there's a few questions here that we need to ask. Number one, why don't we talk about spirituality, right, in our work? Why don't we teach Enneagram spirituality? I get the accusation, or we get the accusation all the time, of ignoring the spiritual aspects of the Enneagram, right, in particular. And then, what is spirituality for us? And, is what we do spiritual in that perspective. But I think the big start of this was, that I, a while ago, wrote something on why I don't teach spirituality in organizations using the Enneagram, right? And I've had some public conversations about this and got labeled as somebody who's anti-spiritual, right? Or that our approach is in some way anti-spiritual or anti-religious. It's not. And it's, I am a former seminarian myself. I've been studying comparative religion for, let's see, 35 years. I've got a philosophy
Comparative
background.
religion. What do you mean by that?
Well, just, the interest in religion in general and spirituality in general and how they compare to each other, right? Comparative religion is, what does this religion say versus what does that religion say? So all this stuff is very interesting to me, but it's just not part of what we teach. And I think what we want to do today is talk about why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not part of what we teach as other people teach it. So there's certain things, and we'll go deeper into that, but we don't explicitly teach certain aspects of spirituality, especially related to the Enneagram, but doesn't mean that, and I'm going to the last question, what we do is not spiritual.
Yeah. So listener, as you know by now, before we get into any topic, we need to define our terms. So let's start with spirituality. Mario, you sent us a 10-page document on your definition of spirituality.
No, come on, man. It's 2 paragraphs from Wikipedia, man. Come on. Jeez. Look, Creek, some people take this podcast seriously, okay? Some people actually prepare, they have their coffee before they show up. They don't whine about having to get up in the middle of the morning in order to,
Right. Okay. All right. I'll remember that next time I'm editing all your mistakes. So let's just do this then. Spirituality. What's the Wikipedia definition?
Well, I don't want to read the whole thing, but it starts off with, the question of why we don't talk about spirituality in our trainings starts off with the fact that it doesn't have a real definition. Okay, there's multiple definitions of spirituality, and traditionally, it had to do with something, having to do with religion, right? Something that pointed to gods in some way, or forces, divine forces, sacred forces in some way, okay? So it really was an issue related to metaphysics and certain assumptions about the existence of gods and how we should interact with them and so forth. And over time, as people started to become less wedded to traditional religious practices, spirituality took on this meaning of, kind of some non-structured, belief system that has respect for spirits, divine sources, things that we don't understand, but that are non-material and so forth. Now, there are other definitions of spirituality that are just, the practices for personal growth. So we've got to first, when we talk about spirituality, talk about what it is we're claiming. Are we making references to the divine? Are we making references to metaphysics? Or are we just talking about something that makes us better people? And if we're talking about something that makes us better people, I'm all for it. If we're talking about something that has to do with a relationship with the divine, there are much better people to talk about than me, than us, and go talk to them. And because all of my clients come from all different sorts of faith traditions, I don't want to go in with any spiritual beliefs or spiritual assumptions that just may not apply to them, may not resonate with them. That's not my job. And if it's just we're talking about something vaguely metaphysical, well, that's a whole other conversation. But we'll save that for at the bar, at midnight or something, because otherwise most of those conversations just aren't very interesting to me.
So if we're seeing the Enneagram as a tool, of course it can be held alongside someone's religious tradition or belief. But when people talk about the Enneagram of spirituality or something like that, can we talk about that? Maria Jose, what's your thoughts on that?
When people started using the Enneagram, and I can refer to the Jesuits, for example, Bob Oakes was a priest, Jesuit, and he taught the Enneagram to a lot of Jesuits, and it spread from there. A lot of people here in Chile learned it from them. So it's probably hard to separate the Enneagram from those roots for some people, and their interpretation of things has the background of the religion that they're immersed in. But as Maria was saying, people we work with come from all different backgrounds, all different religions or spiritual traditions, or none of them, but preferences in their lives. And I think that what we have tried to do is just distill the Enneagram and keep what's purely Enneagram and not conflate it or combine it with any religious traditions, out of respect for the people we work with, but also because not everything applies to everyone. And the Enneagram as a tool is very powerful. If we try to force a particular religious or spiritual tradition to go with the Enneagram, we would lessen the value, I think, of the Enneagram, because people might reject that tradition and not see the value of the Enneagram.
So in your corporate work, when you're teaching the Enneagram, what kind of questions about spirituality do you get?
Do you get any, Maria Jose? Do people bring it up?
Not many, really. Not that I remember, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, people say, oh, I learned this from the Jesuits. This is the same, or something like that. But like knowledge they have about, or information they have about the tool, but no concerns or desire, I think.
So for me, I never used to get those questions, but now it comes up more because so many people hear about the Enneagram in the churches these days in the United States, right? The Enneagram really has had this sort of blossoming in the, Protestant evangelical-ish churches. And so that's a lot of people's first encounter with it that I encounter now. And it's not necessarily tied to a religious perspective necessarily, but I do find that what comes out of that world tends to be really Enneagram light and very superficial and very, weak tea. And so most of the people that I encountered are either mistyped or, have very simplistic understandings of the system. Now, when people do research, they'll start to, maybe they'll come across, for example, Sandra Maitre's book, The Spiritual Dimension of the Enneagram. And this is the other tricky thing, is when people are talking about spirituality, the Enneagram, what exactly are we talking about here, right? Are we talking about this idea of vices and virtues, which honestly are not really religious in and of themselves, even though they were adopted by, the Christian tradition? That concept goes way back before Christianity, right? So that's not even a religious, or spiritual view. But they're very often talking about and here we go again, the Neoplatonic essentialism, and that is really at the heart of this whole concept of essence, right? So in the Western Judeo-Christian tradition, it's more the Western Christian tradition, I think, but no, it goes back to Plato, really. So again, it's this idea that there are these things that exist beyond the material. And, we can get into all day talking about that and, things that are non-material, but, I would certainly acknowledge the existence of, and things that are non-material that I wouldn't, or things that people think are non-material that I wouldn't, admit the existence or agree with the existence of. But it's this idea that there's the worldly and then the otherworldly, in a sense. Okay. And if you go back to, what came out of Echazo's work, and particularly as filtered through, to some extent through Naranjo, but to other extent through the work of Almas and the Diamond Heart School and the Ridwan tradition, I mean, that is a religion, right? Almas's, the Diamond Heart approach, which has been very influential in the Enneagram world. I mean, it is literally incorporated as a religion. It's not just an Enneagram school or a self-development school. It's literally a religion with metaphysical assumptions rooted in the Neoplatonism that we've talked a lot about in the podcast before. I just don't find that stuff interesting. Okay, I think that the things that it's funny because the Maitre book, The Spiritual Dimensions of the Enneagram, I reviewed when it came out for the Enneagram Monthly, and last I checked Sandra Maitre's website, my review was still there, and it was very positive and very glowing. But in the 25 years since, I've come to see things a little bit differently, and I just don't find that those metaphysical assumptions particularly interesting anymore or useful.
I had a question, and I got caught up in your story. Or I was falling asleep, but one or the other.
Yeah, well, I'll take the first.
Well, let's go back to what is a spiritual aspect of the Enneagram that you can feel authentic in communicating?
So are you talking about the kind of the dogma of the Enneagram, the elements of it, or
like in your way of defining spirituality, right? That isn't necessarily tied to a religious tradition. In what ways does the Enneagram aid in those developments?
Yeah. I try to avoid the word spirituality in general. Okay, the reason being, one of the books I read when I was young that had a big impact on me was Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet. Right? And the book, The Prophet, it's kind of a New Age, classic. And it's this idea this prophet goes into the village and they ask him questions and he responds. And at one point they say to him, prophet, speak to us this day of religion. And his response was, have we spoke this day of aught else? Meaning that for him, whatever he would consider spirituality or religion is just living your life in a way that helps, from my view. I think that the big goal is eudaimonic flourishing, right? How can we achieve contentment and a feeling of well-being that's rooted in the efforts to fulfill our potential, and that relies on a few pillars. And those pillars are the cultivation of wisdom, the development of compassion, the development of efficacy, right? The capacity to be skillful in the world and to embrace a sense of wonder, particularly for those things that we don't understand, right? I mean, there are so many things that we don't understand about the world. And I am comfortable just saying, wow, that's something really cool, and I don't get it, but man, oh man, is it cool, right? And it could be looking at the starry night, in a place where you can see all the stars, or it can be looking at these, the James Webb telescope pictures and these things that are rewriting the science books, and for me, there's something magical about that in the non-literal sense, right? But there's nothing magical about it, and I don't feel the need to insert magic into these gaps in what we know about the world, right? Doesn't mean I don't think we should try and assume we know the answers or say, oh, we'll never know. But in the meantime, just sit back and feel awe about things, okay? So for me, I guess that's as close as I would come to a definition of spirituality, right? Cultivate wisdom, cultivate compassion, cultivate efficacy, and cultivate a sense of awe and wonder. And the Enneagram really helps us with that in a lot of ways. But again, for me, some of the, quote unquote, spiritual pieces of it don't really, because I think that they fill in those gaps that I fill with awe and wonder with some things that are just, again, not particularly interesting to me intellectually.
What are some practices from both of you? Like those, if we're talking about those pillars, how do you cultivate those things, the awe and wonder, the efficacy, all those?
It's interesting how this topic can just cover so many things. And
and we spoke this day of aught else.
Yeah,
right?
You can approach it from, take one thread and start pulling from it, and you will get somewhere. But to me, I think that what María was saying, the cultivation of this sense of awe, when you try to explain with all these spiritual words that seem huge and deep and kind of like evolved, like you're at a superior level when you use those words. Like the longer they are, it looks like you.
Hey now.
You are more. And I'm not talking about you, Maria. I think that to me, it feels like you get further away from what's really there. And when you, in my case, for me, when you look at it more simply, without trying to explain that much, but only seeing what there is, it's amazing. I don't need those big words. I think that just when we're doing the work and we truly see someone for who they are, we understand what they want, we can feel with them. And that's kind of cultivating compassion. That's really spiritual for me. I don't need to use big words.
I think too, in addition to big words, one of the things I see that irritates me a little bit is the performative nature of a lot of what happens and I'll just stick with the Enneagram world, right? I mean, I see people positioning themselves as spiritual teachers in the Enneagram world, and it just feels like an act to me. I remember a guy standing up in front of a room and quivering and shaking as he was trying to demonstrate some idea. And it's like, come on, dude, why don't you just talk like a normal person? So, and had I felt it was genuine, right? Had I felt the emotion was genuine rather than performative, I'm okay with that, right? But, as far as practices, look, one of the things I think about doing the kind of work that we do, because we're talking to people all the time about how to do this work, you can't help but have it thrown into your face and say, well, geez, maybe I better do some of this as well, right? Or maybe I should learn a lesson from this and adopt this and adapt, some of these same things I'm recommending to other people. Because quite frankly, if you're not doing that work yourself, your clients will recognize it. And if you're telling them to be more compassionate, but you're not modeling compassion for them, why would they listen to you? If you're not, if you're trying to help them cultivate wisdom, but you're not trying to cultivate wisdom yourself, first of all, you can't teach them how to do it. And second of all, even if you had, if you read a book somewhere and, gave them what was in the book, then, they're going to pick up that this person's not doing the work. So I think, just doing this work pushes us to cultivate wisdom, to try and understand human behavior, try to understand the world around us, try to understand ourselves, and then glean lessons from that we can use, right? Knowledge is just knowing things. Wisdom is applying it. When it comes to compassion, again, same thing. How can I be more compassionate? How can I be more effective, efficacious in life? And the wonder for me, I think, and I think this, it's always something that's been of interest, been a focus of mine. But as you get older, you start to, hopefully grow more focused on cultivating wonder. And, I think there are just so many opportunities, again, from trying to understand the world through science, through the arts. I mean, whenever I travel, I go to museums, right? I go to cathedrals. I love going to cathedrals, right? I mean, I've been to some of the great cathedrals in the world, and I don't know that I ever got more giddy than being in Saint-Pierre Cathedral in Geneva and seeing John Calvin's chair. I mean, for me, that was just beyond awesome, right? And it was exactly as uncomfortable looking as you would expect John Calvin's chair to be, right? I'm surprised it didn't have spikes on the seat.
Yeah.
So, and then going to what's the other city in Sweden? Not Zurich.
Zurich.
You go into Zurich and going to Fraumünster. And going into the chapel and seeing the Chagall stained glass windows in the chapel there. I mean, it just, how can you not sit back and just be in awe and wonder in those sort of situations? So there's plenty of opportunities for this that does not involve making up weird cosmologies and in my view.
I think that the other practice is critical thinking. And you would think that it's like far away from spirituality. But to me, when you really apply critical thinking, when you try to discern better, you get pure emotions, pure reactions, more clear thinking. And it's funny, when you were describing, Maria, all these churches and all that, which I really enjoy as well. To me, part of the wonder that I enjoy the most is people. And when I see people and when I can connect with them and when I can see the impact of what we're doing has on them, but also how they grow, that marvels me. And when you think better and when you cultivate this wisdom, you can help them reach more of that. And if that's not spirit, I don't know. But at least for me, that's the spirituality that I care about.
I think for a lot of people, spirituality and religion is though I'm not always sure they're aware of it, but it is a way in which you are a part of a community that requires you to be confronted by the other that doesn't think like you, that doesn't look like you, that isn't in your same sort of financial class. And I think that is something that is actually sorely missing in our society today in ways that we are able to, in a lot of spiritual religion, like there's a common belief or a common thing that we can on some level agree on, and therefore you are part of my tribe. And I think we just don't have that outside of religion or spirituality without it becoming really dark really fast, like political systems, like political parties, I mean. And I think that is something that I think religion and spirituality is in some places doing better than those that completely reject those spaces.
I agree. I think that a lot of people go back to religion when they have left because of that, because they miss that sense of community of somebody's holding my back. And I was thinking about, as you were talking, about how hard it is to separate the conversation about religion and the Enneagram. Because I think that we're not saying that we're against religion. I think what we're saying is we don't talk about religion in our Enneagram work. We try to keep them separate. But the benefits of religion, I mean, there are also downsides, but the benefits of religion I totally see and I understand and I respect. It's just that when you make it one thing, we get into trouble.
Yeah, I think Maria Jose said a really important thing here that I would agree with you as well. Yeah, I mean, organized religion does that better than anything else. There's creating a sense of community and a social safety network.
Belonging.
Right? A sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of support. Right? Feeding the poor, taking care of the elderly, when somebody who's part of a church gets sick, people rally around, that sort of thing. They give them the support that they might not get anywhere. But again, we're not, like Maria Jose said, we're not arguing against that, right? And that's great. I do think there are other ways to get it, or at least parts of it. And there are lots of ways to get a sense of community that don't involve an organized religion. I think that as far as, kind of the social safety net aspect of it, look at some of the Northern European countries that are, social democracies, the lowest, religious rate, but also the highest happiness rate and confidence in social support, right? If something happens to me, I'll be okay, basically, is the mindset. So I think what we want to do is step back. And again, I want to be really, really clear that we don't talk about religion because it's not part of what we do. Just like we don't talk about fitness and exercise in what we do. Maybe actually a little bit of that, but we don't talk about repairing automobiles in our trainings either, because it's just not what we do. And it's not what we do because there are other people who do it better. Okay, this is the important thing. And my big frustration with what happens in a lot of the Enneagram world is that people who seem to want to start something, their own thing, use the Enneagram as the central point of some sort of new religion. Okay, a spiritual school or something like that, which again, fine. If you want to do that, if you want to build a spiritual practice around the Enneagram, for me, it's not that interesting. It's limited. There are better ways to do it, but go ahead. But what we have, and what my big concern is when people start talking about the spiritual, work with the Enneagram, is that there's people with no training, with no deep history in a tradition, with no oversight, who are going out and taking advantage of vulnerable people and putting them at risk by, doing these quote unquote spiritual things that they have no right to be doing. Okay. And the reason we don't talk about religion or spirituality in our work is because we're not part of a religious or spiritual tradition in which we have training, authorization, guardrails against misuse for. So we leave those things to other people. Real simple.
Yeah, I would also add that when we want to do good Enneagram work, we're very careful in several ways. The words we use, how we define the terms, the examples we use, the exercises we do, all of that. That involves what we combine it with. And if we use a word that it's too loaded, people will not want to see themselves as that. So it makes the tool less effective. For example, when we use striving to feel powerful, we explain what we mean. Otherwise, people assume that it's taking advantage of people.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Abusive or something like that. So we define the term. So we're very careful about that because the Enneagram will be useful as long as people see themselves more clearly. If we combine it with other things, political things, religious things, which are loaded, people will have a baggage and that will affect the effectiveness of the.
I think that's a hugely good point, Maria Jose. And, look, in the United States, it is just really bad practice to, go into an organization and start espousing any spiritual or religious perspective in the work that you do. In fact, there are laws against it in doing work with the federal government, right? So consultants can't go into a federal agency and do compelled training that contains religious elements to it. Okay. So because that's the law for federal agencies, most corporate agencies follow the same practice. Now, there are some that don't, right? There are some that are overtly, religious in some way or another. And again, that's fine. But so from my view is it's just not what we're supposed to be talking about here, right? It's somewhere else. So that's it's really important.
Yeah. If the Enneagram is a tool, it can be used in a lot of different scenarios. And that doesn't mean that just because I have a hammer doesn't mean I'm a carpenter, also doesn't mean I'm an auto mechanic. But they can both be used in those situations. So not mistaking the tool for the maybe profession is an analogy we could use.
Yeah. So that's a good one.
Yes. Finally. This is on no coffee. Come on. All right. Any final words as we close out this episode?
Yes, I think that there's another risk, and maybe you have mentioned it and I missed it, but treating the Enneagram as a religion in the sense of not questioning your teachers or the dogma, seeing the Enneagram kind of content as dogma, and which might be limited, but and that's even worse. So I think that that's another risk of using spiritual language and treating this as a religion or a spiritual tradition. This is not. This is just a tool that it can be used, as you were saying, in different contexts. But when you lose the capacity to question what you're being told, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Maria. It's a really important point, and I'll add to it the really disturbing, comments I've been hearing in the Enneagram world lately about people receiving, the Enneagram or teachings about the Enneagram through, help from above in some way. There's that famous video where Naranjo, talks about the origins of the Enneagram, and he says, well, Chazo gave me the kernel of the idea, but, the rest of it came to me through guided writing. Well, okay, whatever, right? I'm skeptical. And I heard other, pretty major Enneagram teachers talking about getting guidance from above. Downloads, right? That's another word for crazy. Right. I mean, when you're hearing voices and think you're getting downloads, that just never ends well. Avoid that stuff when you hear people talking about it. Please just take a left turn when you hear those things.
And most of the times when we finish our trainings, people say this is spiritual. And we have not used any spiritual words, but we're trying to teach people what María was saying, wisdom, compassion, effectiveness, and this sense of awe. And people get it. To me, at least, that feels fulfilling. And we're not trying to be seen as spiritual, but we're trying to convey these skills. And a lot of people see that and appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. We look forward to hearing your questions, comments, and snide remarks. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Awareness to Action Enneagram podcast. If you're interested in more information or talking to Mario, MJ, or myself, feel free to reach out to us through the links in the show notes or by emailing info@awareness-to-action.com. All episode transcriptions and further information can be found at awareness-to-action.com/podcast. On the Q&A, you said something about like you're the ChatGPT of something. I missed the moment to be like, where do I prompt for shorter summaries?